This is episode 1 of my new podcast series, Adventures of the Arrowverse. If you enjoy this episode, hit the button down below, subscribe if you're new, notifications on. And before we get into the episode, I want to point out that if you're on my Arrowverse Discord server, and if you're not, there's a link in the description down below. You can click it and join the server. Every week, when I do an episode, the week before the episode airs, I will be asking the community to give me their opinions in response to whatever the topic I'll be talking about in the podcast episode. For example, this one is episode 1, season 1 of Arrow. I already asked the community, well, a while ago, because I did push this episode back, actually, due to things happening in life. I had to push, all that. I asked the community to respond and give me their opinions about Arrow season 1. These responses will be mentioned at the end of the podcast episode, maybe the last 10 to 20 minutes. If we get more responses, it'll be longer than that. I do plan on responding to every single response that we get for the podcast. So when we do episode 2, which will be about Arrow season 2, when you guys are seeing this today, I would have already asked the server to give me the response to Arrow season 2. Again, those opinions will be shared at the end of the episode of that respected episode for the podcast. I'll be doing that throughout the entire podcast. What I plan on doing for the podcast, there'll be every season of the show is for one episode. For example, episode 1, like I said, season 1 of Arrow. Episode 2 of the podcast, Arrow season 2, and yada, yada, yada. When we get to episode 9, we'll go to the Flash season 1, and then we'll go through all the Flash seasons. If there's a season currently airing now, like the Flash season 8, I won't be doing a full review of it until it's done. So that'll be another late episode in the podcast series. And then I'll discuss later down the road what I plan on doing once we actually finish all the seasons of the shows. Which will be, I think, roughly probably 30 weeks. Who knows? Somewhere around there probably. So I hope you guys are excited. And I hope you enjoy the rest of this episode. And I hope to see a lot of you responding and giving me your responses to include in episode 2. So thank you for support. Thank you for your patience. I appreciate it. Enjoyed the episode. So like I said, we're going to be talking about Arrow season 1. These are my opinions. And we're going to be sharing other people's opinions. Basically, this is like an opinion-free zone. No hate towards anyone. Just rare in the Arrowverse. But if you're a part of the Arrowverse community, you know what I'm talking about. Especially if you're on the deep end of it like I am. You know what I'm talking about. There's so much toxicity and opinions for the Arrowverse. And you'll mainly be hearing my opinions, but you'll also be hearing other people's opinions as well. So, yeah, let's start off with my review of season 1. I generally don't like pilots. So when I think of a season, I don't look at the pilot. I don't know why I don't like pilots. I just don't. And I didn't really care for Arrow's pilot. When I first watched it. In truth be told, the only pilot I've ever liked, not just in the Arrowverse, but in general, was Superman and Lois. Their pilot, I loved it. This is the only pilot I've ever liked or loved in my entire life of watching television shows. So, there's you can debate whether it's good or bad. But I wasn't really a big fan of the Arrow pilot. There were some good scenes in that. But I really looked at the second episode of season 1 and of a new show, and it was a pretty good episode. I want to point out that the flashbacks in season 1, while they weren't the best, but I think they were out of the 5 years we had of flashbacks, and I'll go into more detail about them when I get to their year, season 2, 3, 4, and 5. I think season 2 gave the best flashbacks, and season 1 was second to best on that list. Maybe because they were just on me and you throughout all that, and they were doing so much going on. It was really good for the show. But I do think season 1 had one of the best flashback seasons, whatever you want to call it, especially for the beginning of the show. Which again, Arrow is a show that's never been done before. They took a huge risk, and they managed to pull it off for 8 years. And who knows, maybe in 9th season will happen, who knows. But that's a thing for another day. But it's really coming down to flashbacks, which like I said, I think were one of the best. And also, just the interaction between every single character, especially in the early season 1, right? Because we're dealing with Oliver seeing everyone again. We're dealing with Oliver seeing Laurel again after her sister died on the yacht. That crash, and then Oliver's dad dying, shooting himself in the face and killing that other person in a life raft. And to keep Oliver alive, Oliver being a Lian Yu or whatever he was doing for 5 years. And then coming home and Quentin not trusting him, Laurel hating him. And because it's his fault that Sarah died, obviously. And I'm pretty sure season 1 was a lie detector test with Quentin and Laurel representing Oliver. I'm pretty sure it was season 1. And just the, like, you could tell Oliver blamed himself for Sarah's death, obviously, because why wouldn't you? Because it was kind of his fault, but he took the blame for it, and no one really cared that he did. They just wanted to pay for it in a way. But it was very good interactment between Oliver, Quentin, and Laurel. That whole interaction in season 1, I mean, you could tell they were pissed at Oliver, but at the same time, if he helped them out, they wouldn't, like, bite his head off for it in some ways. At least Laurel really wouldn't, but, And then we're dealing with Oliver coming back and not really being the Oliver that he was. The rich playboy. He was now a vigilante. The Hood at the time. Now it's Green Arrow, obviously, or the Spectre, whatever you want to call him. But I just thinking back to the pilot, like Adam Hunt and him stealing all that money. I just remember that I was talking about Quentin's thing. Like, I don't know why I came up with I was talking about Quentin, but I did. Just talking about that. Like, the whole Adam Hunt story, that was an amazing storyline for the pilot. Again, I didn't really care for the pilot, but I will say when there are, good things to be looking at, like I said, for, like, fight scenes and that, which I think is what really carried Arrow over the last several years, was these fight scenes, was these one-shot fight scenes. I don't think the pilot had it, but especially later in the show, like around season 4, 5, 6, and etc., we had a lot of one-shot scenes. Basically what that means is the camera wasn't cutting in and out to different people or to different, like, cuts and everything. It was just one whole scene. That's what made Arrow, for me, a lot cooler, was that they actually did something like that, especially in the later seasons. Because remember, they're on a TV budget. Now, Arrow didn't really use their budget that much, because, like, compared to Flash or Superman and Lois, because, he doesn't have superpowers. And he's not really doing much. I mean, you might throw an explosive arrow, or just CGI, obviously, in some cases. But, I mean, we're not dealing with a lot of CGI on the show, which I think is good. If we were doing with, like, CGI and everything, it'd be kind of absurd. So, but I think the show did really well without it. 103, I'm remembering Felicity. Her first appearance was just amazing when I was first watching through it. Just to clarify, I didn't come into the Arrowverse till, like, at least for Arrow, until season 7-ish, like around there. Like the back half of season 7 of Arrow. And I watched 8 when it was on, and I went and binged all of the Arrow, even 7 and 8, because I was bored and I wanted to rewatch it. But I can remember 103 and Felicity's interaction, and just the community's response to Felicity being, like, Emily Bett Richards, who played Felicity, her being on the show playing Felicity was, like, so hyped up. It was amazing. And seeing that Felicity's role really carried throughout the show, because everyone wanted her on it, whether or not that changed later in the seasons, but the point is, everyone wanted her on the show. The connection between Steven and Emily and Oliver and Felicity was, like, the best engagement we've ever had with two characters. One that's supposed to be a side character, one's the main character. It's like, you don't see that every day on a TV show. You really don't. So when you find it, you might as well keep what's keeping that environment, you know. And then obviously we have Dig coming in and supporting Oliver as the Hood, helping him whenever he can, and also trying to keep the body count low in many ways, because he is killing people. He's at this point where Oliver is killing people, but to save a lot of lives, obviously. But I do think that, you know, Dig trying to keep Oliver's humanity at bay, you know, with whether it's by Felicity or whoever, you know, Dig's trying to keep Oliver on the human side of things and not, you're only the Hood. Like, you're also Oliver Queen, you need to realize that. Which kind of carried throughout season 2 and 3 and a little bit of 4, I guess you can say. In some cases, season 4. I think season 4 really changed that, but there were still some aspects to, like, Oliver only wanted to be the Green Arrow, not Oliver Queen. It was even much, I think, in season 5, I think, when there was a hit on Oliver and the one guy was like, you'd rather be the Green Arrow than Oliver Queen. But, which again, subtle differences throughout seasons, it's different then and now, but, I do think Dig's interacting with Oliver was always, like, the best thing on the show next to Felicity's engagement with Oliver. So that's always something that I look at when I'm looking at the show, like, the interaction between all these characters. You don't see that every day. You really don't. So I think that's something that a lot of people seem to forget, is that while this show is focused on Oliver Queen being the Arrow, I mean, he does need help. He's not the Flash. He's not Superman. He's not Supergirl. Like, he has a bow and arrow and he's running around the Hood. You know? I mean, it sounds ironic, but that's the truth. He does need help. And to make the show only about Oliver, I mean, it wouldn't really make sense. And season 1 really shined a bright light on that. In a good way, not a bad way. Having Oliver, like I said, interacting with Dig and Felicity and other characters to help him out, I mean, it was really cool to see. I mean, you wouldn't see that in real life. I would hope so. Obviously, if it didn't happen in Arrow, we hope we don't see it in real life ever, but at least the majority of it. But, you know, yeah, that's my point. Interactions with the Hood and, like, Quentin Lance and Laurel at some points were really good. Obviously, the main villain of the season, the Dark Archer, a.k.a. Malcolm Merlin, a.k.a. Tommy's father, and Tommy's obviously Oliver's best friend, so, you know, some stuff going on there. And Malcolm's making the undertaking, or creating the undertaking, with a doomsday device. Superman. Do you think they were trying to tie Superman to that when it said doomsday device? Probably. No. It'd be funny if they were, though. They just predicted all this time that we get a Superman show. Doomsday device. I wonder where they get that from. And then dealing with the fallout of Tommy dying at the end of the season because of Malcolm's device. And, you know, which was a really emotional death scene. I think it was the first on the show, right? Like, the main one of the characters closest to Oliver dying, I think that was the first death scene on the show was 123 with Tommy. I could be wrong now. But any fight scene with Oliver and Malcolm, not just in season 1, but out of it, but especially season 1, because it was always, like, highlighted in the season. Like, those fight scenes were always amazing. I think it was 111 where Oliver had his first encounter with the Dark Archer. And Oliver got shot in the back like 3 times with an arrow and he almost died. And then seeing that toll it took on him, like an episode later, where he ran into a building on fire to save people and he wasn't taking risks. He was like moving down, trying to get down safely, which he did. By the time he got down there, the person he's trying to save died because he didn't take risks like he was before. He knew what he had to do, and then he got hurt really bad, and he started down himself, and he didn't trust that he could take risks without losing more people, which obviously he took less risks and lost more people. So seeing him going through that, like again, I think it was 111 and 112, it really shined. I'm assuming it was 111. It's somewhere around 1. If you watch the season, you remember it very well. You know what I'm talking about. But that was just the thing that popped in my head was you did see Oliver go through what leads you to be a good hero, which is if you get hurt, get back up, but also don't, you know, stop doing what you're doing, you know. But I think it's also a thing that we've seen in several superhero movies where they don't necessarily think they're invincible. I think we all knew Oliver didn't think he was invincible, but Oliver wasn't planning on being defeated the way he was, which is humiliating to him. So when he's going into a situation blind, like he did then, and getting caught off guard and getting shot 3 times and nearly dying, you know, who knows what that would have done for him. But as we saw that in the next episode, with, like I said, him taking less risks and letting people die easier. Well, not really letting, but he didn't really take many risks to save people. Which is a problem that Oliver had in those episodes. The excuses Oliver and Dick had, it was mainly Oliver and Dick. I don't think Felicity really had any for Oliver because she never really needed to defend him. But the excuses they came up with, like to say that where Oliver was while the Hood was somewhere else, or why he got hurt all these times where they had to end up in the hospital, and Thea and Maura would find out, and Walter found out that Oliver would get hurt all these times, end up in the hospital, and he'd say bike accidents or whatever. I mean, that was always, I think it was an excuse in season 2 and 3 with the bike thing. Like, Oliver riding a bike and he ends up getting hurt like 100,000 times. I mean, and probably added up to that, honestly, with all the bike excuses they had. But I think that's definitely something that was, like, humorous on the show. But it was also, like, for, obviously, like, Oliver's mom, sister, and stepdad, I guess. It was kind of, like, you wouldn't really catch on to that, you know? Like, I think I would. Like, if my kid was telling me, oh, yeah, I got into a bike accident 10 times today. I don't have a kid, by the way. I'm speculating. I don't have kids. I'm saying if I did have kids, and my kid told me, like, hey, I got into a bike accident like 10 times, I probably would question it. So, I don't know. Just that little, it would have been a little funny interaction there, but I think they did question it several times, if I remember correctly, but the excuses he came up with are always so stupid, but it made the show a little bit more funnier to add to that dark tone the show had. Not saying the dark tone was a problem. I like the dark tone. But we did need that little humor in there, even though Felicity was there to kind of amp that up. You know, having Oliver and Dig come up with these stupid excuses, which made sense, but it was also just getting old, but it was still funny no matter what. Because it would still believe it no matter what. But yeah, dealing with Thea's drug problem, I think they dealt with that. I don't think they dealt with that in season 1, or at least in the flashbacks, but dealing with Thea's drug problem in the present with Oliver budging in and everything, I mean, you know, helping Thea get past all that, which obviously we saw in season 8, if Oliver wasn't there, you know, Thea would have died, which is true. I think we all knew that, to the flashbacks and the present. Seeing Laurel being I think she was a drunk in season 1. Or Quentin was a drunk in season 1. And then Laurel and Oliver tried to help him. You know, dealing with, just this season was, like, good overall. It was good storytelling. There was good episodes. I mean, obviously there were some downsides every episode. Like, every show has that. But I do think it's fair to point out that what we got in the first season of Arrow, it was really something that's never been done before. So that's something I think everyone needs to really look at. You have failed this city, originated throughout the entire show. So it wasn't just a thing in season 1, it was a thing throughout every single, you know, show. And it did start with season 1. I think it was the same that Oliver had, and he stuck with it even throughout season 8. I'm pretty sure he said it, or he changed it in Crisis, but you have failed this universe. We were dealing with Vertigo in season 1, which then carried to season 3 and 2 and other seasons past that with Count Vertigo. I think Bronze Tiger, possibly, if I remember correctly. I mean, it really was a good season. Going back to the flashbacks, Yael Faye, Shadow, and Slade all being in the flashbacks. I'm pretty sure Slade was the good version of Slade before he became, obsessed with drugs, the Mary Crew. I mean, seeing how that changed in season 2, especially season 2. I think that's why I'm putting season 1 flashbacks above 3, 4, and 5. Not above 2, but 3, 4, and 5. Because there was so much connection to Oliver and the other characters on the island. Like, we're seeing what happened to him. Instead of what most shows would do and say, oh, I spent 5 years on this island, let's just talk about it throughout the entirety of the season. No, they're actually showing us what happened. They're bringing us through it. While sometimes they weren't good flashbacks and like future seasons, I mean, it was pretty cool to see that. I mean, we didn't see that, like most shows wouldn't do that. I think, like I said, season 1, I think is one of the best seasons of the show. I didn't watch it at first because I saw some clips and I was like, I don't need to watch it. But I actually just finished watching it a couple weeks ago while I was sick. It was my first time ever watching season 1 of Arrow. So, and then I ended up watching all the other seasons because I was still sick. So, if I'm overlapping stuff with like season 2, which is more likely, I apologize and I'll try to fix that in episode 2 of the podcast, obviously. But, I think season 1 really made the show what it is. Obviously, season 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8 really, brought it up another level, right? But season 1 was just too good to not be like, they took a risk. They knew what they were doing with Steven and everyone else in the show, but mainly Steven. Him doing his own stunts, him actually being the Hood, like actually acting like it and not just like he, like actually feels like he was the Hood or the Arrow or Green Arrow throughout all these years. I mean, he played the role to the T. Like, he knew what he was doing. He knew that he had to bring his A game. There was so much stress on him. He still pulled it off. And it brought the show 8 good years. Even though there were some downsides every now and then. It was still a good 8-year show. And if they bring it back for a 9th season, I think we can all agree it would be even better than the last 8 years. Let's be real on that. Because Steven is a good actor, and they showed that in this show. And if without Steven, we wouldn't have The Flash, Supergirl, Legends, Batwoman, Stargirl, Superman and Lois, hell, Naomi, even though they're not in the Arrowverse yet, or who knows if they will be, ever. I mean, we wouldn't have all these shows without Arrow. You could argue Smallville, and Gotham, but this is the first show since Smallville where they've took a risk on a character, let alone with no powers, which Smallville never did. But a guy with no powers being the main lead of a show, that was a huge risk they took on its own. And they managed to pull it off. And Steven did an amazing job in season 1, and along with all the other seasons. Like I said, all the interactions Oliver had, all the interactions that everyone had with the Hood, that was completely different from Oliver. There would always be these two different sides. You have Oliver Queen and the Hood. They're one person. Whatever interaction you had with Oliver Queen, it's going to be different with the Hood. That's always something that I look at, and it's like the same with Green Arrow. You have an interaction, especially in like season 5 or 6, before his identity was blown. I mean, you would have an interaction with Oliver as the mayor or whatever, and then as a Green Arrow, he'd be completely different from the interaction you had with him from someone else before. That was always what I liked about his character, is that he knew how to keep those two lives separate. He never really overlapped unless it was absolutely necessary to. And by that I mean, he knew when to be the Hood as Oliver Queen. If he was Oliver Queen in the field, like, he would be the Hood. He would be the vigilante. If he was in the field as the Hood and he needed to be Oliver Queen, he needed to be that heartwarming guy that would help people, he would be Oliver Queen. He wouldn't be really the Hood in a way, but he knew how to control that, and we saw that really shine throughout season 1 and obviously seasons after. But I mean, I still keep thinking about the Dark Archer and this whole storyline with Malcolm and Tommy, because honestly, Tommy found out when Malcolm revealed himself to save him, at the end of season 1. And then Tommy finding out Oliver was the Hood when Malcolm got shot a little bit before he actually revealed it to Tommy. Those scenes where Malcolm and Oliver revealed themselves to Tommy were so good. Like when Malcolm came out to Tommy about the earthquake machine and him being the Dark Archer, and then when Oliver came out to Tommy about being the Hood, the vigilante, whatever. I mean, those scenes were like really good scenes. They're like top of the line writing, top of the line acting from both Steve and I don't know the other two actors. John Barrowman played Malcolm. I don't remember who played Tommy, but those three in the scene together, even just Tommy and Oliver, Tommy and Malcolm. I mean, they were really good in those scenes. In the final fight scene of season 1, I mean, it was the best fight scene I think the show's really ever had compared to the last fight with Oliver and Diaz and several fight scenes with Oliver and Prometheus in season 5. I mean, it was really good. And Oliver and Slade fight scenes were really good, which I'll talk in episode 2. But dealing with, the possibility of just seeing these fight scenes on the TV show on a CW budget, which is really saying something. It was really, really cool to see, in my opinion. And I'm so glad they managed to pull it off. I'm going to cut over to the community response now. And so, yeah. Again, let me know your comments and your opinions in the comments down below. Do you remember that you can share your opinions over the episode that I'm talking about in the podcast episode, or the season that I'm talking about in the podcast episode, Can't Talk, in my Discord server. Join it by clicking the link down below. I'm not going to read names off because I didn't ask if I could. I will be sure to do that next time. So this person on my server had a lot of points. To start off, he said, I forgot Sarah was played by someone else. She actually was. She was played, I don't remember the actors, but it wasn't Katie Lotz at first. It was some other person that they cast as Sarah when she died, but they ended up bringing Sarah back and casted her as Katie Lotz. So there were two Sarahs, two different actors, and they played it off as nothing, which made sense because that's how television works. You have filled the city is still the memorable Arrowverse quote, not only on Arrow, but in the Arrowverse, and he is right, it is memorable in, like, all the shows. I mean, if you think about Green Arrow, you'll probably think you have failed the city. I mean, he said it so many times, and it literally became a thing on Arrow, where he would say it whenever he was about to stop something, it was hilarious, but it was also really cool to see that still be carried out throughout the show, and in crossovers, too. He also pointed out that Deadshot was in season 1, which I pointed out earlier. And the interaction between Dig and Deadshot and learning more about Dig's dead brother. He also said, I would have liked more Huntress. And I forgot Huntress actually in this season. But the interaction between Oliver and the Huntress, Oliver thinking that she's a good person, she's not going to really harm anyone, she can keep her at bay. I mean, looking at what they do, even though Oliver helped train Huntress, and leading up to the story where Huntress became the bad guy and bad girl, sorry, the weekly big bad, I think it was a good storyline for Oliver and Huntress, because Oliver opened himself up, and then he got kicked in the butt because he opened himself up, because he trusted someone. And we really saw that take a toll on Oliver in many ways. I don't know why I thought Roy was introduced in season 3. I didn't even realize he was in season... I knew he was in season 2. Was he in season 1? I thought he wasn't. But if Roy was in season 1, I wouldn't remember it, but... Yeah, what am I saying? Roy was in season 1, let's be real. Everyone was in season 1. Completely forgot Walter existed. I liked Walter in season 1 of Arrow. I loved it when Walter was on. I wish they brought him back for season 8. Obviously, they probably couldn't because of scheduling or whatever. Merlin is still top 5 Arrow villains, but still Deathstroke is better than Malcolm. I do agree with that. But I would consider Prometheus better than both Deathstroke and Malcolm, just because he brought it a whole nother level. And it was kind of like Deathstroke and Malcolm in one. So, to me at least. He then mentioned Yale Faye and Shadow and Slade flashbacks. Tommy's death and also the Lance sisters. And he said, what we didn't know was to come, with, I'm pretty sure, mentioning Laurel's death and all that. And then someone else said, one of the best flashbacks again any season, only top of Arrow season 2, which I basically said that a little bit earlier in the podcast episode. And I do agree with that. And also the other person who shared his opinions on season 1 of Arrow agreed with that as well. Again, when we do episode 2, let me know your opinions about the season. They'll be mentioned in the end of the podcast episode next week. I don't plan on stopping this anytime soon, so hopefully you guys enjoyed it. Hopefully it'll be a little bit more organized as we get going. That'll be my goal at least. So yeah, if you enjoyed, hit the button down below, subscribe if you're new, turn notifications on, share it, comment, and join my Arrowverse Discord server. Leave your opinions for season 2 when I announce it, obviously. And yeah, I think that's pretty much everything I want to go over. Have a good day, have a good night, stay safe, and we'll see you guys in episode 2 of Adventures of the Arrowverse. Thanks, guys.